Raise your voices, raise your glass high. Welcome to the Drink O'Clock Podcast. Let's dive. Oh, grab an old fashioned and join the fray. Raise your spirits, let the music play. From the corner pub to the dance hall floor. Drink O'Clock Podcast, we're ready for more.
We're coming at you live with another episode of the Drink O'Clock Podcast. I am your host who's drinking tonight, which is, I haven't been drinking on my podcast, but it's a holiday. So I figure, fuck it, might as well break out the old fashioned. So that's what I'll be drinking tonight. My name's Rob Valincius. I am the host. And I have Dr. Albert Bramante. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, you did, and thank you for having me on. And yeah, I definitely say drink up tonight. It's a holiday weekend, and you deserve it.
Yeah, it's a beautiful thing. Now, Albert, you are a talent agent, you're a hypnotist, and you're also an author. Your book was The Rise Above the Script. So we got a lot to talk about today. But as we always like to start, so are you drinking?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay,
But
not a requirement for this show at all. Not a requirement, but
well,
I'm just gonna cheers you symbolically.
cheers. Okay.
Oh, God. I stopped drinking on my show because got to a certain point where I'd get to the end of the interview and it was just a little sloppy. So
Yeah. Well, I can imagine it could be a little awkward.
I stick to just drinking water for most of the time. Now sometimes I'll have a drink. It depends. But for the most part, I try to keep it classy, you know. But I encourage everyone to alcohol loosens lips, right? At the end of the day, I'm doing an interview show, and sometimes it helps people open up a little bit because it's not always the easiest thing to do.
I would imagine so. It lowers inhibition.
Yeah. So let's start the show today by talking about you growing up. You know, what led you to where you are now? Because I think a lot of times we don't know that from seeing your content, seeing what you do. I saw your website, which is great. Talk to me a little bit about what got you into, being a hypnotist and an author and a talent agent. I mean, you got a lot of cool stuff going on. That's not unlike a normal person, so to say.
Well, I have a very interesting background. So I was born as a different one in my family. When I say different, I went against the mold. I mean, I'm the youngest of five, and all my older brothers and sisters were heavily into athletics and athletes. And my father was a coach, and he was also into athletics. And me, I had zero skill and zero interest in athletics. Naturally, they tried to toughen me up. They tried to put a ball, a bat, a glove, or a helmet on me to try to toughen me up. And for me, I couldn't do it, and I didn't want to do it. It wasn't that I'm sure I could have. I actually tried. I just had no drive or interest in it. I was more of the reader. I was more of the intellectual type. I was more of the deep thinker of the family.
You could say it on the show, man. You were the nerd of the family. I feel it.
I
I'm there
sure
with
was.
you. I'm there with you,
I
bro.
sure was a nerd. I was sure was and I was and I kind of was the loner because I didn't really know how to fit in with the athlete side of my family, and they really did not fit in with me because they had no interest in books, and here I was. So I was a nerd, and I read a lot. I was an avid reader. When I was in high school, I started reading books about the brain. I even read a book about hypnosis and self-hypnosis, and this is back in the early 90s. And I became very interested in the brain, behavior, and relationships and all that stuff. So I became that's what really ignited my interest in psychology, ignited my interest in really human beings in general. And I was also in the drama club in high school, so I really didn't have no intention of being a thespian or an actor, but I really it was fun. It was
Yeah.
a great way to meet people, and I was very involved in high school extracurricular activities, as well as in college. She was a lot member of a lot of student organizations in both high school and college, and I went to college, and I also took a couple of acting classes as electives in college and theater classes, and I enjoyed it. And so when I received my master's degree, I went to a comedy show, and they had an hypnotist there,
That's
with
interesting.
performances.
Okay.
And I said, let me go volunteer. I was the type of person that I liked risks. I didn't know anybody in the audience, and this was thankfully this was before cameras were on cell phones, so there was no way of knowing. No one can find any video of that. So I did it. I did it, and it blew me away in the sense where I was really impressed with hypnosis, and that's what just got me just naturally curious about it. That I put it on the back burner for a while after that. When a few years later, I started working in like New York City area, and I was working with actors, and that reignited my interest in kind of like the drama aspect of things. So I
Yeah.
pursued acting myself, and I realized it wasn't for me. I really didn't have the drive or really the natural talent for it. They didn't have the persistence to go for training. So for me, I really didn't want to be an actor, but I like being around actors. I like being around creative people, filmmakers, producers, directors. It was just a great place of people to be around. And for me, that was like my sanctuary. And so that became an interest of mine. Like, I want to work in show business. Now, I also have my master's degree. I also started teaching part time, at a community college. And I loved teaching and I loved helping people. So I decided, why not become a support network for actors? And I didn't know what that looked like. And then I became one thing led to another. And then I opened up my first talent agency. I said, maybe this is what I really want to do, represent and support actors. And so that was around 21 years ago. And I also enrolled in a PhD program now because obviously I wanted to kind of still please my family. I mean, they were not, I can't say they were entirely thrilled when they found that I was going to be a talent agent or open up my own talent agency business. That was really, I don't think that was in the cards for them. For
Hey
me,
man, dreams, they're not,
it,
especially if they're yours, they're not always everybody's, right? And
well,
I
and
guess
that's very true. They're not for everybody. And so I kind of, at that time, I was like, I want to go back for my PhD because I was halfway there, and I always wanted to be a doctor, in a sense. So I was like, I might as well just complete it and get it and do it. So I enrolled in a PhD program, and my first year into the PhD program, I, my agency was starting to take off, but the one issue I kept bringing up with actors were self-sabotage and self-doubt amongst actors. And it was a number of times I was seeing this and hearing stories, not from others too, that were in the business. And I couldn't figure it out because on one hand, you had a lot of actors that were like saying, I want to work, please get me work. And then yet their actions were telling the story. Their actions were, they were, self-defeating. They were, in a sense, like, what I mean by self-sabotage, like being late for appointments, not showing up for appointments. Because if you think about it, those two behaviors are going to guarantee you're not going to get the job
Yeah.
as an actor, or even probably even be auditioning for that same person again. So I couldn't figure out what was really happening here. Like why? Like what's the thing here? So I asked my advisor when I was going for my PhD to look at my dissertation and possibly can I integrate that? And so they loved it because not a lot was written about actors. So I said, you know what, I'm going to do my dissertation topic on self-defeating behavior in performing arts, which then became the groundwork for my book years later and Rise Above the Script. So
That's
that's how the
awesome.
book was born. And now, while I was in a PhD program, I became started to become disillusioned with psychology a little bit. I still love it, and it's even to this day. But I was initially going to school to be a clinical psychologist.
It's what I
That
wanted
was
to go.
my
I wanted to be a psychologist in college as well. That was
yeah. That was
my favorite course. I've taken 8 to 10 psychology courses in college. It was
mhm.
by far I was the most fascinated with the brain.
Yeah, and I loved it too. And I thought, oh well, I'm going to be a clinical psychologist. But there were a couple of things that started to not add up for me. One was the preoccupation and fascination of labeling people as pathology, as sick, as mentally ill, and it was kind of like a stigma. The other thing that really wasn't adding up, and this kind of, I don't think they really appreciated when I asked this question because I really kind of challenged them. I'm like, if you have you're telling me that you have a client that you're seeing for 8 or 9 years, and they're not getting better, you think maybe the therapy approach is not working?
You're not good at your job, maybe.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it like that. I was thinking that, but I wouldn't say that. But I was just thinking, okay, because most people are not going to be able to afford 8 or 9 years of therapy, especially if they have insurance covering it. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And if there's nothing happening, no breakthroughs, what's the point? And then while this was happening, I read a flyer in the magazine Psychology Today was learn hypnosis. And I remember back to my experiences, but this was amazing. So I did the first intro video course, and I liked it. I was like, okay, and then I looked for a local school in New York. I'm New Jersey, but I also was very close to New York, so there was a program in New York, and they were offering a 3-month program certification. In person, and it was like a 150-hour certification. I went all in and received my first, certification in hypnotherapy, and then I took some other certification classes over the years. So why I like hypnosis is because it's really fascinating. It goes deep, but and it does complement psychology very well, traditional psychology. But I feel it's much more rapid and much more faster than traditional psychology.
You're like tapping into like the id, ego, superego type shit,
Yes,
right? It's like you're
we're
you're
going deep.
tapping yeah, you're tapping into the stuff that well under the iceberg that people don't even know exist.
Yeah, and that's the purpose of it, because like the purpose of like well, if you really want to look at group therapy, we want to get in and get out and fast, and not spend years of tipping toe. Now, traditional psychology, you can maybe get to the id, ego, and superego, but it's gonna take a long time in talk
Yeah.
therapy, in traditional talk therapy, because people have defenses, and that's so. And so I started to find how much more rapider hypnotherapy can be to get to get with fixing the problem. So it's going beyond than just talking about it. So that's where I became really interested more in hypnosis and started distancing myself from counseling. And so I was like, you know what, I'm just going to finish some PhD and go more on the educational track and research track, and then just so I can complete my degree and end it. So I am a psychologist, not a licensed one. I'm more by education and training. So, but I consider myself more of a performance psychologist because with my research for my dissertation and just overall experience working with actors, my area of focus is more again on peak performance and working with limiting beliefs.
Have you ever read anything from? I was just looking at it here. From Brian L. Weiss, MD.
Yes, that's more, and that's an interest of mine. I don't really advertise that, but I am very esoteric as well.
Yeah, that's
And the many, and that was actually, which I don't talk. I'll be honest with you, yeah, I don't talk about it that much. But that was my first. That before I got certified in hypnotherapy, I did a past life certification. Uh, and now that if I went to my psychology faculty and said, "Hey, I got certified in past life regression therapy," I probably would get be certified myself in not that same way
yeah.
because it would just be like, okay, this you're crazy.
That book fucked me up, man. Many Lives, Many Masters was a
Hmm.
book. I think it's like I do a lot of audiobooks because I drive a lot, so I hate the radio. There's just too much the dumb bullshit on there.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm at the age. I'll be 39 this month. I'm pushing 40. So I've gotten to the point where I do boring shit when I'm driving. Like I don't pump the fucking radio in my car like I was when I was a kid, you know?
Yeah.
So I listen to audiobooks and I stopped listening to a lot of fiction. I'll do a lot of nonfiction. So I just finished a book on, I love World War II. So just finished a book called Tripped about, drugs and shit like that after World War II and post Germany and things like
Hmm.
that, and LSD. It was really good. But that book, and I think he it's all about hypnotism. It's psychology, but he hypnotizes. I forget what the girl's name is that he hypnotizes, and he taps into all of these other lives that she's lived as a soul, and then eventually he
Hmm.
gets to the masters, which are according to him, right, with his research and the things he's done, the way the afterlife is it's almost like a hierarchical thing, right? You start at level 1 and you have quests almost, and you build yourself up to a certain point, and then there's masters, which is like the people that guide other souls into getting
Hmm.
those next levels. And it fucked me up a little bit. It made me question a lot of things, and I'm
It certainly will. It certainly will because on one hand, and like for me, to be quite honest with you, I'm a healthy skeptic when it comes to that.
me too.
Um, I don't discount it, but I don't walk around saying to everybody, "This is because you have a bad life." That would just no. Um,
Yeah.
because I also know the way the ego work in a Freudian sense from dream psychology, your mind comes up with metaphors for current situations that you're going through. So there's that argument that also that theory with past life regression that literally wasn't a past life. Your subconscious is telling you a story about whatever issue you're going through now.
Plus,
And
I do feel as mammals, and I feel like we also almost absorb past lives from our species. So it's not something you might have lived through, but it might be
yeah,
something
our ancestors
our
did. And
ancestors like. I'm here.
yeah.
uh, Let me see. We're still recording, so you're good, man.
Okay, so what I was about to say was when you were talking about the how we absorb, different energy or different memories from our species. There's
Yeah.
also a concept. Of one of another person I've studied a lot is Carl Jung,
Yep.
who believed about the collective unconscious, which kind of talks about that in the sense that we kind of have a universal, vast memory pool from all species and all human beings, including our ancestors. So,
Yep.
like the spirits of deja vu, like sometimes they feel like you've been somewhere, even though you've never were there. It feels like a familiar place because it could be that you're picking up a memory of somebody else. that was there.
Which just fucks you up even more.
I,
You
I,
know,
I mean, we can really go deep, on that. Like,
that's why I love psychology, because there's just so
yeah,
many different um, views, and I feel like none of them, although some may counter each other, a lot of them play off of each other very well. You know, and whether you're clinical, whether you're um, what's the other one? Fuck, I'm having a brain fart. There's like how many different types of psychology is there? You
oh,
know,
hot
there's a
dozens.
there's a million of them now. So I do like, and also that's another thing about psychology too, is in today's day and age, they're not like they were in the 50s, right? Where it was like, all right, there's three different things, right? You're either crazy or you're retarded or you're this, right? There was no like
Right, no middle
jurisdiction.
ground. That was it. You were just one or the other, and that was it.
Yeah. And now there's just so many different things that they can classify, but they constantly evolve the classifications. So they do, they're not very archaic like a lot of other practices, right? They are constantly updating their book. What's it? Is it the DSM?
Yeah, we're now on the fifth edition. Like,
Okay.
and it was only really came out in the early '70s that the first DSM really came out, and then now we're in the fifth edition, and a lot of stuff that was normally considered mentally ill now is not considered anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's fair, right? I mean,
Mhm.
societies change. I think we're in a unique societal orbit right now.
Oh,
There's a
especially
lot
I would
of
say the past 5 years we've been, yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of stuff that is interesting and weird and cool. And look, I grew up with my stepdad was bipolar. Well, is bipolar. He didn't grow out of it. A good friend of mine that I work with is bipolar,
Mhm.
and also suffers from Tourette's. And then my late stepmom had bipolar, so I grew up with a lot of some of that craziness.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's fucked, man. It's a tough thing to suffer from. I don't envy anyone that does suffer from it. It is a
Same
very
here.
real
It is
mental illness.
definitely a debilitating condition, and there's varying degrees of it too. And but if you have a severe case, it's definitely challenging for the person as well as ones around, surrounding that in the orbit.
Yeah, and there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to take your meds and hope for the best, right? Because I think
Y-
even with the meds, it doesn't always do what it needs to
It
do.
it doesn't always do what it does because there's many different medications out there, and some work better than others, and it depends on the person too. And also, a lot of psychiatric medication has very unpleasant side effects. So to stick on to them, and so it's hard for a lot of people to stay, adhere to it and adherence because the side effects are unpleasant. Unfortunately, the
Like
moment you go
seizures.
seizures, nausea, vomiting,
Like
gallbladder, kidney.
I've witnessed my stepdad have multiple seizures. And the one, my mom thought he was dying. She thought he was choking because he was eating. My stepdad was weird. He would eat hungry man dinners at like 6 a.m. Like he would
Wow.
do just weird shit. And he was eating like a gravy and mashed potatoes and steak, a Salisbury steak or something. And she thought he was choking. And in reality, he was having a seizure. And he dropped the fucking plate. It fell on my dog, who's a poodle. He was white, so he runs out. He's got gravy all over his body. He doesn't know what's going on. And I'm trying to give my stepdad the Heimlich because I thought he was dying because he was choking. And in reality, he just had a seizure. And at some point, I'm trying to give him the Heimlich, and he starts snoring. And I'm like, Mom, he's fucking snoring. He's not choking. He just had a seizure. And she had no idea. But a lot of that side effects was from his bipolar meds, which he had to take 9 or 10 different pills.
Yeah.
And the cocktail always changed, right? Because your brain chemistry changes. So like, what worked well 2 years ago, your body builds an immunity or things change. It doesn't help you in 2 years.
Yeah. And now you got to go and get used to another drug now, another cocktail. And
But that's the other thing too. And I appreciate psychology more than I do psychiatry. So, and I think that there's a noticeable difference because a lot of the
big
times,
time.
and you know what, you're going to find good people, right? But I feel like 95% of psychiatry is, all right, well, what pills can I give you to alleviate your issues? Whereas psychology is more of a, let's talk through this. Why do you think you need this? Why do you think you are the way you are? And
Yeah,
then you can decide, right, if you need medication.
and also just coping with the thought, the ruminating thoughts, and the urges, the behavioral urges, and drives in a sense. So you learn to, now maybe you might need a medication to control you may and to stabilize it a little bit, but then you also have to learn to control your moods and your state, and that's where therapy comes in. Medication is not going to do that. It's just here's a band-aid.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that I think I've always not liked when you're looking at those two. One's a very talk approach, right, and it's figuring out through experiences what's going on, what your mindset is, because I think mindset plays a big part in a lot of that, right? It's like, yes, you suffer from bipolar, which causes manic shifts and depression shifts and all that other stuff, but let's get to the nitty gritty and figure out, all right, well, what brings some of those things on? Because I think, like my stepdad, he had a horrible accident. His dad and his older brother, died in a horrible car accident around Christmas.
Hmm.
When they were younger. And anytime around Christmas, he would stop taking it was like clockwork. He'd stop taking his medication, and he'd take 50 Xanax or abuse some dumb shit like what's the drowsy fucking medication you get in case you have
Ambien,
Benadryl.
maybe.
Benadryl. He would go to the
Benadryl,
doctor. He
okay.
would have fucking cheap Benadryl. He'd take a whole pack at one time.
Oh,
And he would just be fucking loopy because he's off his meds. He's bipolar, and he's on whatever medication or drugs he could find or booze, and because it was a way to cope. And as a kid, it's harder to understand. As an adult, it's way easier to understand. Like, that's a fucked up situation on top of one of the worst type of mental illnesses. Maybe not the worst, because you got schizophrenia and
yeah.
multiple personality disorder, but bipolar's up there. It's
It
definitely
sure is. It really is.
definitely not one to be like, all right, well, if I had to choose, I wouldn't want any of it. But listen, let's talk a little bit about hypnosis, because I think for me, I think that's very unique, and you don't find too many people that do that. Obviously, you're certified, so can you tell me something that maybe is misunderstood about
So
hypnosis?
a lot of people think when they see hypnosis or people in hypnosis, they're watching a show maybe or seeing something on TV where people look like they're zonked out, and then next thing you know, they're uh, cooking like a chicken or doing some really foolish stuff on stage.
Guilty.
Um,
That's what I would think.
yeah. The reality of it is you're never going to be conked out. You're completely aware of everything. So it's not, even though you may hear his hypnotist say the word sleep, go sleep now, it is not the sleep sense when you go to bed at night. It's just a more state of tranquility and focus. So the one thing I think what surprises a lot of people when they first experience hypnosis is that they're aware of everything around them. And I think a lot of times people get confused. They're like, "Well, I didn't think I was hypnotized," and you would ask, "Well, why do you think that?" Well, because I heard everything. Great, that's what we want, and even the people, if you ever ask people who've been on stage who really went, deep into the stage, and you'll hear them say, "I know everything that was going wrong. I heard everything. I knew everything," because your awareness is even heightened. You're just tuning out the outside noise. It's like a flow state. It's like being in a being in the zone. So if you ever like watched a movie or like in your case or even read consumed an audiobook, you just get lost into it.
Yeah.
That's a trance. That's what we call hypnotic trance.
Sports people talk a lot about that, like LeBron
Yeah,
James and like high end people. They call it the
yeah,
zone,
and
and
even
they're
being an
making
athlete,
everything.
go right. Your focus right. Most athletes when they're on that court or their focus is so much on the next play that they're not worried about what anybody's saying around them. They might not even hear the coach talking to them because they're hyper focused. That's what a state of hypnosis is. So we're just doing that by design. We're getting into that state just by design.
Interesting. So, how do you use NLP, which is neuro linguistic programming, in your
Yeah, I
coaching,
mean, I
especially
use it
with
more in a
creatives?
I use it more in a conversational sense. So a lot of times it works well with limiting beliefs. So especially with creative people, like if we look at the linguistic with neurolinguistic program, we're talking about language, and the power of language is extremely, again, probably the best hypnotist that we can have is only the words we use. So if your creative person is walking around saying, I'm a starving artist, or I'm a struggling artist, I'm broke, or I'm this and I'm that, what you're doing is you're creating a reality. You're creating your identity. You're creating that broke state by using the power of words. So in a sense, even if you want to use like hypnosis, you're hypnotizing yourself to be a broke artist. And your mind, your deeper mind, the again, the whole id and ego is saying, okay, I hear your command. Broke, loud and clear. And so therefore it may hold you back in what you need to do to move forward.
So that's like the what's the saying? You're your biggest enemy, right? In terms of
Absolutely.
you're constantly saying, "Oh, I suck," then you're just gonna suck.
Hmm.
What's your thoughts on words of affirmation? Because you see a lot of that now on social media and TikTok and all that stuff.
On the surface, they're good, but you have to fully believe it. That's the first thing. If you're going to say this affirmation just to say it, it's like, okay, I know maybe this may offend people, but you know how like you go to confession, like, okay, say these, three Hail Marys, and now you're free. And
Yeah,
usually you go right back out to doing what you confessed to do anyway.
yeah.
Well,
You're
and then
like,
your mind,
Father, I'm sorry. I banged a hooker. I know
yeah,
that's not right. And he's like, all right, say 10 Hail Marys. And you're like, as soon as you walk out the church, you're going right back to get a hooker. you know?
exactly. So the words themselves, affirmations themselves, are not necessarily powerful unless you fully believe it. You have to fully believe the action, and in order for them to be effective, you have to take action. And that leads me to another topic, that something that came out very big, maybe 15, 16 years ago, was the secret, the law of attraction. And almost everybody was on this train of like manifestation and
Mm-hmm.
abundance and all that. And that's great. That's the first step. But if I'm going to sit here and tell you, I want to manifest $1 million, that's great. But if I don't do anything to get that $1 million, or at least set the process going, it's pointless.
Yeah.
And that's where I feel like the limitation, the law of attraction, is they're missing a piece there. Now, I'm not saying that that's not helpful and important to have the mindset, the positive mindset, but you're missing the step of action. What action are you going to take? So, like, okay, you want to earn six figures next year. What actions are you going to take to get there? Because just me talking about I'm going to earn six figures is meaningless.
Yeah. Not going to do shit for you at the end of the day.
Yeah, if I'm going to sit here and make six figures, that's not going to happen unless I happen to meet a benefactor who just and that's rarely going to happen. So the point is, where's the actions I can take from that? So if you want to do the affirmations, great, but what actions are you going to take for that? If you're going to say you're living in abundance, what are you doing to help get you in that direction? What actions are you taking?
And that's a mindset thing, too.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
you know,
And the affirmations can help, but there has to be the action component. Because if you don't have the action, again, it's just affirmations. I'm just saying words, the right words, but they don't mean anything.
yeah. Can you walk us through a time when you used hypnosis to help a client make a big breakthrough? Obviously, you don't have to tell us a ton of stuff, but
I've seen people heal trauma, whether as doing myself or observing other people and seeing people heal trauma. Um,
We all have trauma, right?
every
Cheers to
one of
that.
us. Every now, when I talk about trauma, I think it doesn't necessarily have to be like someone that's sexually abusing us or beating us
Yeah.
up. It could just be daily life of the trauma. Your parents maybe weren't there. There was a lot of fight. You grew up watching an argument between your mother and father. That's a trauma. Or you competing it hard for your parents' affection, or maybe your parents showed affection towards one sibling over you. That's trauma. Even though it may not seem that way, it's not sensational, but it's still trauma. So all of us have trauma, every one of us walking the planet. I think that's what makes us human beings.
Yeah, I agree, man.
And
Now look, you're. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
and the one thing that I can tell you from a creative standpoint, if you can help someone get the noise out of their head, like the inner critic and the self-doubt or the overthinking, a person can become a much more powerful performer, whether it's an actor, a speaker, a salesperson, because they become what we call unstoppable. And so I've seen it work where a person can actually, as an actor, book more roles because of changing their mindset.
Yeah, listen, I've talked about this on my podcast before, and hopefully, I have some young guys that listen to this. So, I always tell people my mindset for a long time was, you know, I could have done better. I look a lot at the past about situations I was in that I could have done better, and sometimes I would just wake up miserable. And it got to a point where I was like, I gotta stop that. I have a great life. I have a beautiful fiance. I have my dogs that I love. I live in a good house. I have a good job. Life could be way worse,
Yeah,
and ever since I made that change, and look, I'm not perfect. I still sometimes get up in a pissy mood because that's just, we're human, right? But I
yeah,
do appreciate life and what I have a lot more. And I think it takes part of your brain to just say, all right, you need to stop. You can't.
yeah,
And I'll bring this up. I don't typically talk politics, right? You had the big beautiful bill passed today, right? And everyone's freaking out. And for me, you're right, we're all impacted to a certain degree, but I always tell people that's something we can't change. That was going to pass probably no matter what, right? You have a Republican president, you have a Republican House, Republican Senate, everyone's Republican, right? So it was probably going to pass no matter what. There was some changes, right? We weren't going to be able to stop it. So you can't control that. There was nothing you could do to stop it, right? The regular man isn't going to be able to stop it. You just have to take, things are going to change over the next couple of years. You just have to take what happens and try to run with it, right? You can't control it. There's other things you can control, and you can't let those things dictate your
right.
mindset, because what are you going to do about it? Unless you're the president, you can't do shit about it.
Yeah,
Like, we can freak
and
out, but what's that going to do?
exactly. And I see, and again, doesn't matter what side you're on, but I see people who are constantly posting every day about something going wrong in politics, and I almost want to message them and say, "Look, I get it, your opinion, you have a right to that, but why don't you start doing something productive, rather than worrying about something you have no control over?"
Yeah. Yeah, and there's nothing you can do. So at the end of the day, right? And the two things I hate chatting about is religion and politics, because I think there's always a loser, and that's never a good conversation. But
Yeah, and everybody has their own beliefs. That's why, I
yeah,
usually stay away from those kind of topics because it's for me, it's not worth getting into a debate. I'd
yeah,
rather.
yeah. I couldn't agree more. But I think in our world today, you do have to just kind of we got to get out of this box of thinking, oh, the world's over. Yeah, it sucks. Look, we all get it. There's the rich get richer, the poor get poorer. That's the way the world has been for eternity.
Yeah,
But to go back to the mindset thing, it's just trying to think positive, trying to stay positive, and not letting something you can't control affect that mindset. Now,
of course, and we go in cycles. Things that one of the things, like it's like the whole mindset, this too shall pass. let it go. It'll pass. Whatever you go by it, and we have an election in another 4 years, and who knows what will happen then?
That's when you have a say.
Exactly.
That's when you have a say. Now, your book, Rise Above the Script, that was written for actors, right? But it also resonates with entrepreneurs,
Of course,
creators.
entrepreneurs, coaches, sales people. It really we and everybody deals with self doubt, self sabotage, and even peak performers too, because those that are like more successful. I think another myth that a lot of people don't realize is that even the more successful like CEOs and maybe even like multi-million dollar companies might also are going to have their moments too, where they're going to be self-doubting and beating themselves up and waking up feeling sometimes in a shitty mood and feeling self-doubt in a sense.
Why do you think psychology is so universal?
Because one thing I think as human beings, as much as we may be different from one another, there's a lot of similarities. I think we're more similar than we're different, and as far as like the struggles that we go through, and I think just as a species, because even our ancestors went through. Now maybe the context may have been different, the situations may be different, but I think they share the same thing. That our brain really hasn't evolved, as far as when it was hundreds, thousands of years ago. Still the same brain, same structure. We're just in a different surrounding.
Yeah, we have light switches, not
Yes.
candles. A little bit of a different struggle there. What are some common self sabotaging patterns that you see, and how can someone break through some of that?
So the first step is realization. Now the thing with self sabotage is it's not conscious. Like you don't wake up and say, today I've just been self sabotaging all day today. You really don't do that because you don't realize it's happening. So one thing that you could say is like, do you constantly find that things are not going in your favor? Do you feel that everyone's against you or the world's against you? What I often say is sometimes take a step back. Now, yeah, there are situations that'll never work that may not work out to the way you want it to. But if you constantly find yourself in these situations where, things are just not going right, then maybe consider how you're adding to that equation a bit. Is it something you're doing too much of or not enough? And also, one of the things about self-sabotaging behavior is it's all behavior is protective, whether it's protection from danger or just even from fear.
Yeah, I get that.
And so a lot of times what if we have a lot of anxiety, again, maybe we grew up in a family where that environment that gave us a lot of anxiety. Our brain is there to protect us. Our ego is there to protect ourselves from this anxiety. So sometimes it can go into overdrive, that protection, too much. So that it'll start holding you back and kind of keeping you from achieving what you need to achieve. So do you find yourself always being late to appointments, missing deadlines, forgetting things, um, not doing what you can be doing in a sense? Like, so that would be the first step to just take a step back and say, how am I contributing to this?
So, can you explain how, fear of success plays out psychologically and why so many high potential people struggle with that?
So success, on a conscious level, who doesn't want success?
Yeah, we all do,
Yeah,
right?
we all
I
do.
want a million people to download this.
But if you think about it, sometimes that means change. So, so let's say I'm just using this example of the podcast. You get a million downloads. Great. Now your identity is going to change. So now you're going to have a lot more eyeballs on you and eyeballs on your podcast, which might mean depending on how you approach it, maybe more pressure for you now. Okay, now you need to perform. Now you need to always be on top. Make sure you get good quality guests. So your life may change, and now you're going to be more devoted to your podcast. As an actor, let's say you land a Broadway production or lead in a TV series, your life is going to change. Or a CEO gets a major promotion, now his or her life is going to change. They may have to relocate. They may now have to. They may lose their friends too, because even relationships too. Now, we like to think our social circle now really wants the best for us, and I would say most of the time they do, but they can also be threatened by successes. And I hear this a lot from like famous people that they don't really get enough support from their family. And sometimes the reality is maybe the last place of support you're going to get is from your family, immediate family. So there's that threat of losing relationships. Because I was reading an article once about this CEO. She was promoted in New York. She was promoted to a Fortune 500 company. She went through the ranks and she really became like the top CEO of the company. And huge pay raise, her own office like on the top floor. But what she lost was almost all of her co-working friends that she had wouldn't even want to be around her anymore.
Mm.
That can be a bit of a unconscious fear of losing people because relationships are so important. We're social animals, so fear relationships could be different. Just fear of change in general, because success means more responsibility, more change, and also our identity too. Your identity is going to change, and we like to stick to our identity. As human beings, we fear change because it keeps us comfortable.
Yeah.
Without change. Staying in the same level keeps us comfortable. But the one thing that we can guarantee that's guaranteed about life is going to change. We're going to change. Everything's going to change.
I'm a
So
creature of habit.
yeah, we're a creature of habit, and change is scary. I mean, look at what we went through in 2020, for instance, with COVID. How the whole world changed, and people were not coping with that at all very well. So because they were
I
still hoping,
loved it. I loved it. I'm not
a
gonna lie
lot
to
of people
you.
did, yeah, because they like to be. It was time to be alone.
Well, I
It
got to
was,
spend a lot more time with my family. That
yeah.
because you don't realize. I work a 9 to 5. Well, 8:35 now because that's just how it works. But I work that 9 to 5, and you just don't realize how little time you get to spend with your family. And we have dogs; those are our kids. So and with my dogs, and for that 3 or 4 months that I was able to work from home, it was I loved it. I didn't start the day driving to work and getting irritated at people cutting me off, and I didn't have to that I got back 2 hours every day of my life. So
Yeah.
um it was a unique time in society, and I know a lot of people dealt with it differently, and especially we're talking a lot about psychology, right? I mean, I'm sure you had people that abused alcohol a lot more because they're at home, or you had people that lost their jobs. You had a lot of those. If you were a hairdresser or a massage therapist or whatever, you lost your job because you couldn't practice. So you had a lot of change everywhere. And like I said, I'll be 40 soon, right? I don't think of any other period in our timeline that would ever coincide with that. I mean, you had 9/11, but that didn't shut the world down. It made drastic changes, especially to fucking airport security, which is the worst.
Yeah.
Um, but it didn't fundamentally change, and I think people came out of that a lot different than you would think
Yeah.
with the isolation and things like that. Now, do you believe success can be rewired into our brains? And if you think that, how?
So the one thing is to rewire limiting beliefs. So one thing is to what's ever holding you back. So a lot of times people are scared of taking action. So I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll procrastinate. It needs to be perfect. So the idea is to just take action. And when you start taking little steps, whether it's whatever it is you're setting to do, whether it's write a book, writing the first couple of pages and do it without thinking about it. So stepping outside your comfort zone. So success can be rewired. Now it may mean changing your habits. It might also mean hanging out with much more successful people because our social circle makes a huge difference. Like if you hang out with all people that are unsuccessful and negative, well, you're going to be. That's where the whole expression "misery loves company."
That's true.
So, but if you hang out with other positive people that are really hardworking, determined, that's going to rub off on you. So that's going to start to rewire success. So the one thing I would say is start consuming podcasts, join Facebook groups, join masterminds, join other groups of entrepreneurs, join other, successful business people. Study their content, learn their systems.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'll tell you, I'm an entrepreneur at heart, and I'm also a nerd. So I actually created a collectibles business because I got back into collecting Pokemon cards because as a grown man, I remember collecting Pokemon cards and it was fun. And me and the wifey, we have like a fun time opening cards together and stuff like that. But I started selling those things and I connected with a lot of people that were doing it, and I took bits and pieces of what made them successful. I ingest when I get into something, and I don't know if you're the same way. I like, and it sounded like you did the way you were talking earlier about psychology and stuff. I go all in, so like
Oh
I
yeah.
learn everything there is about it. I try to pick up whatever I can from the people that are successful on YouTube and on socials. And I took a lot of the things that they did and I started implementing that in what I do. And I've been having some pretty good success, which is cool. You kind of absorb, but like, I think if you're a true entrepreneur, not everybody is against you. I think a lot of the people, was it, what's the saying? High tides raise all boats. Just because I'm successful and doing well selling collectibles, you can also, there's a million fucking people.
Hmm.
There's so many people that you can
Of
sell to,
course,
right?
yeah.
And I think that's the mindset a lot of people need to have is that we're not in competition, right? We are, but we're not, right? There's so much business out there that you can teach each other things and build each other up and still
Hmm.
be successful in that. And I think for me, as an entrepreneur, as I've been doing this for a long time in terms of doing different things, that's one thing I always want to make sure I bestow upon people that you have competition, but that competition can also be a great learning source for you, and you can build off of that together. You can learn from each other.
And that's also I think another myth too. Like sometimes you're learning the strongest people you can learn from are people need that you're direct competitors,
Yeah,
and you can really develop strong alliances because it's like okay, we can healthily compete, but we can also support each other too.
yeah. I mean,
And so,
look at Google and Apple. I mean
yeah,
they're fierce competitors, but guess what? Apple TV is pretty big, and you can download that on the Google app, the Google
yeah.
Play app. So, and it
And
vice versa.
if they ever down the line make a merger, you can forget about anything else because it'll be a powerhouse.
Ah, absolutely. And you never know what the world's going to hold. And I work in the insurance field. So, I mean, that happens all the time. I mean, companies buy other companies, absorb companies. And,
Yeah.
before you know it, they're one big health insurance carrier. Now let's jump to your book. You wrote Rise Above the Script. What inspired you to write it, and what surprised you the most throughout that writing process?
So what surprised me the most was how easy it was once I got started and got into the flow. And I think when I finally completed the book, what also surprised me is how well it resonated with people. Because I think I was going through my own self doubt. Was like, oh no, are people going to actually want to read this that I wrote? Are people going to really want to follow through? With what I wrote, and so that was something that I kind of was running through, my in my head in a sense.
What was your own script you had to rise above in your own life and career?
I think it was I can't do this, or just even that like no one's gonna want to believe what I can write. So, and that's where I kind of wrote. That's where I came up with the title "Rise Above the Script" because I wanted to use a metaphor for actors, in a sense, script, but I mean the script that we have in our minds.
Because
And
at the end of the day, we're like computers, right? I
we're all
mean,
our
you got to
computers,
rewrite
and
it.
a lot of times our subconscious and our brain really accepts commands as is. So if you turn around and say, I can't do this, your brain says, okay, understood.
Got it.
So
We
that's why
aren't doing it today.
you're not going to do it. And another thing that I can say, is even get rid of the word try out of our vocabulary. You know,
I like that.
um, because if you say like, "Are you going to come out this weekend?" Yeah, I'll try. You might as well just say no.
That's
Or
someone asking me to come out on a Friday night when I'm, yeah, I'll try to do it. No, I'm not
yeah,
doing it. I'm
no,
not doing
no,
it.
because and when somebody says, "Well, I'll try to do this," no, you will do it or you won't do it. Simple as that. Now, and that's why, like, when people say, "Well, I tried my best," I'm like, "No, you change it to you did your best, or you will do your best. Not you will try your best. You will do your best."
I like that. I like that. Now let's end on this. Um, what's a daily mindset practice you swear by, or you would encourage people to try or do?
I would
Do we're
say
done with try,
just,
right?
well, definitely do. I wouldn't say try to implement. Um, I would say plan your day a little bit, the night before and the next day, and even just say to yourself, and every day in every way, I'm getting better and better. And you're not perfect, but you're getting better and better. And just take action would be the biggest thing too. So someday it's not on the calendar. So if you have this plan or you want to do this project, start now. Start it. Because once you're in action, it builds momentum. You keep going.
Yeah, and before you know it, you're gonna be 60. You know what I mean? And time flies. Like
Exactly.
I,
And that was like for me writing the book, I was like, I could sit here over a year telling you I'm going to write a book, but if I don't do it, I'm going to turn 50, 60, 70 and be like, yeah, I'm going to write a book someday.
I mean, it's a cool, and I would say, from this side of it, it's a cool accomplishment to say, hey, I wrote a book. I'm an author, and I love interviewing authors because I feel like, it doesn't matter what type of author you are, you always have every interview I've done with an author, they have a different type of mindset and how they get things done, which
It
is
definitely
unique.
is a game changer, and that's why, like, anybody's listening, write. Don't worry about it, just write.
Gives you credibility too, right? Because you're talking about, you know, uh, hypnotizing things, right? And that's something that I think it's a taboo topic.
Hmm.
So when you can go out and say, "Hey, I'm an author. I wrote a book," and yeah, okay, I think you should try this. I think it gives you more credence to what you're doing.
Yes.
So, look, man, it was a pleasure having you on. Can you plug yourself? Tell us where we can find your book and where we can find all your stuff.
Sure. Well, you can find it on Amazon, and it's I have available in different formats. I have Kindle, hard paperback, and audiobook. So, and you can find me on albertbramante.com. You can also find me on all the channels. I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, as well as Instagram.
That is awesome. And I'm telling you right now, while we're on the show, so I'm not bullshitting you, I just bought your audiobook
Thank you.
because I always like to support the creators that are on the show, man, because yeah, we got to keep us going.
Yes.
There's no way else to do it.
Well,
But look,
great.
my podcast is the Drink O'Clock Pod on all socials. Drink O'Clock Podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. It's on fucking everything you can think of. And like I said, Doctor, it was a pleasure having you on the show, man.
Thank you. Well, thank you again for having me.
You have a great night.
You too.
On a stormy night where legends unfold, there's a podcast that's breaking the mold. Raise your voices, raise your glass high. Welcome to the Drink O'Clock Podcast. Let's fly! Oh, grab an old fashioned and join the fray. Raise your spirits, let the music play. From the corner pub to the dance hall floor. Drink O'Clock Podcast, we're ready for more. We're ready for more. With a mix of folklore and rebel cheer, we'll guide you through tales of whiskey and beer. From Irish shores to lands afar, Grab your friends, it's time to raise the